refusing to play the Bullies game by turning the other cheek. Hi, this is Dave Hughes. Welcome to my Dealing with Bullies Without Resorting to Violence series. Today we're going to look at another way of keeping the fight from happening in the first place by using our brains instead of our fists, what we call mental self-defense. Now these are things that we can use to keep the fight from happening before it gets violent. Now, there is a teacher that I consider a much greater teacher than I that used to teach his students that the way to deal with bullies or deal with violence is simply to turn the other cheek and avoid the fight. The principle behind that is the fact that it takes at least two people to have a fight. It's really hard to fight yourself. Now, it can be more than two. That's how we have gang violence and even wars. But since it does take at least two people to have a fight, if you refuse to fight, that leaves the bully with a little bit of a dilemma. Now realize that they can strike at you, and sometimes that they will. Now most bullies though are trying to start a fight and become violent so that they can build their low self-esteem in front of others, and if they're trying to do that, they usually won't strike many times and they won't strike as hard because they're trying to provoke it, and they look smaller in the eyes of the crowd if they continue to do that. So that a lot of times that won't happen. Now, I'm not saying this is always the best alternative, but in fact, whenever I do this when I'm talking to kids in schools, I almost in the back of my mind saying, yeah, right. But I thought back on it, and this is a true story from my own childhood. One thing that I go into my book about dealing with bullies is when I was growing up, my father had a rule that was if I were to ever get into a fight, he would pull me out of my martial arts training. And I loved the training so much. Now I got to spar a lot, but it put in, when I was at the playgrounds, when I was in school, that put a target on my back because the kids knew I wasn't going to fight back. And one strategy that I actually used, now not only did I do, growing up did I do judo and Japanese jiu-jitsu and later taekwondo, but my father's older brother was a professional boxer, and we lived very close by, and at times I actually lived in the same household as he did, and he worked with me quite a bit in boxing. And boxing and wrestling, unlike the Asian martial arts, a lot of times with the Asian martial arts they think that it's just about technique, and a lot of times people don't do a lot of conditioning. Boxers and wrestlers are smart enough to realize that the physical conditioning is a huge part of that. And that's something that I started at a very early age, doing tons of physical conditioning. So much so, this is not to brag, but several years after my elementary school closed, I have a sister who's 8 years younger, and when they closed my elementary school, she was still in that school, and the physical fitness records that for push-ups, sit-ups, and things like that were still intact, and they sent the plaques home with her. Well, now I was back in high school, but she was still in elementary school. My point is, I was doing push-ups, sit-ups, crunches, plyometrics, all this stuff on a regular basis that most 6-year-olds and up weren't doing. And after doing this for a few years, if a kid really wanted to fight me, one thing I do is, okay, take your best shot, hit your best body punch, and then decide if you want to fight me. And this worked pretty well because they'd hit me and they'd be, okay, maybe not. In fact, in middle school, one kid, hi Russ, broke his hand on my stomach. If you're going to be a bully, learn how to punch correctly and not get what's called a boxer's fracture. But the reality is, guys, it was just a simple way of applying what we're talking about. And that's turning the other cheek to keep the fight from happening or keep it from escalating. At least it got me where I was not pulled out of my martial arts classes.